All right, so good morning. I'm Christina. I'm with Nature Kids BC, and we're so excited to be joined this morning by Chris and Jamie and Jennifer from BC Parks. Chris and Jamie work for the wildlife um, collabs and out at the University of British Columbia. So they'll talk to you a little bit about what that means. But we're gonna look at about their work about camera traps and tracking wildlife in our big backyards and seeing all the creatures that we share this world with that sometimes aren't so obvious to us. Before we get going, I just want to acknowledge that I'm in Vancouver and that I live, work, and play on the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations peoples, and we thank them for their stewardship of the lands and waters since time immemorial. And if you know the First Nations peoples on the land where you live, you can pop that into the chat, and maybe Chris and Jamie can let us know where they're calling in from too when they do their intros. Yeah, so welcome to our members, welcome to our guests. For those of you that are members today, just a reminder, today counts as a passport day. So don't forget to get your parents to sign your passport after this event, and then you can send in a passport for after you get 6 events, that you can send it in for really cool prizes. So don't forget to do that after this event. And if you have questions today, you can pop them into the chat. I know Jamie and Chris have some pretty cool interactive, some sort of games for us. So you can use the chat to say hi and to practice with that. And when they run their presentation, you can add a chance to win more prizes today. So you can pop that into the chat. And I think that's it from me. So thanks so much. I'll turn it over to Chris and Jamie.
Sweet, thanks, Christina. I'm just gonna start sharing my screen as Jamie and I introduce ourselves. So let me just go ahead with that. All right, perfect. Everyone can see that? Thumbs up, maybe? Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Chris. Today, Jamie and I are gonna give a little bit of an interactive presentation that we've titled here, Eyes in Our Parks, Studying Animals Using Camera Traps in South Coast BC. And similarly, we wanted to start by just acknowledging the 3 kind of South Coast parks that we are focusing on in this presentation, and the several traditional territories of the nations that occupy those lands. And then we just kind of wanted to, give a quick introduction to kind of, as Christina mentioned, what Wildco is and kind of what we are as a lab as a whole. So the Wildlife Coexistence Lab at UBC that Jamie and I are a part of, it's a really, really fun group of researchers ranging from graduate students to undergraduate students, as well as postdocs and researchers, and then our fearless leader, Cole, on the right here. And we kind of focus on wildlife coexistence, and we have a lot of projects in BC parks, including these South Coast parks, as well as a really diverse array of projects all around the world. We have kind of global synthesis projects and collaborators all around the world where we get to study different kinds of wildlife, and how that wildlife is able to coexist with people. So it's really a privilege to be able to work with some of the people that we're able to work with, and it's in the same way a privilege to study the kind of animals, and get to study the things that we are able to study, because it's it's a really, really fun topic, and we're just really appreciative to be a part of our group, and we just wanted to kind of acknowledge them. So I am, oh, there we go. So my name's Chris. As I said, I'm calling in today from Vancouver, and specifically the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And this is me and my natural habitat up on the top left here, with a nice yummy burrito in my mouth, out in the field, doing our work, checking out camera traps, and my research, my main research focus in the Wildlife Coexistence Lab at UBC is to study these really beautiful creatures on the right, which are grizzly bears. And I kind of, my research as a graduate student in the lab has focused on how grizzly bears are affected by logging in Western North America, as well as specifically in Southwest BC. And so I've gotten to, spend the past 2 years kind of falling in love with this species and learning, everything that I possibly can about it and talking to experts about it. And it's been, a really, really fun ride. And if anyone has any, questions at the end or wants to contact me in the future to talk about grizzly bears, that's not the focus of this presentation, unfortunately. I'm happy to talk to you about grizzly bears anytime. But yeah, so I just wanted to introduce myself, and I'll also let Jamie introduce herself here as well.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so I'm also a part of the WildCo lab. My role within the lab is a research technician. So a lot of what I did over the summertime was field work. I would go out in our parks mostly and go and check our camera traps, replace the batteries and the memory cards. So a lot of hiking. I did a lot of hiking over the summertime, definitely wore my hiking boots out. And now, since the field season is kind of wrapped up, I'm going through all the images that we've collected from our parks and other research areas. So yeah, I started back in May of 2021, so I'm a pretty recent addition to the lab group. I'm from Vancouver, and I actually grew up in South Coast BC parks. This picture of me absolutely zazzed to be out in the field was taken in Golden Ears Provincial Park, where I spent a lot of time camping as a kid. So it's pretty cool to go back and kind of see these parks in a whole new perspective. Yeah, and one of my favorite parts of my job is seeing where my feet take me in our beautiful BC parks. So yeah, these are a few of my favorite shots from the summertime. Up in the top right, that is in Cathedral Provincial Park, which is pretty close to Osoyoos, if anybody knows where that is. Absolutely beautiful. There are mountain goats there, really cool park. And below that, that's a collection of some of my field mates, also in Cathedral Park. It was pretty cold that day, so we're all pretty bundled up. And on the bottom, that is a picture from the Southern Chilcotin Mountains Provincial Park. And I got to do a 5-day hiking trip there at the end of my field season, so there's a little bit of snow. Yeah, it was really cool. So I've got to do a lot of cool stuff for my job, and I feel pretty lucky. All right, I think we can go to the next slide. Sweet. So this is just a little bit of a breakdown of what we're going to talk about today. So first, we're just going to introduce everybody to what is a camera trap. We're all going to get on the same page about what we're even talking about here. Then we're going to kind of break down what we do in the lab before we go out into the field, and then what we do when we are in the field. So before we go out, we need to decide where we're going to put our cameras. That's a pretty important part of what we do. And then once we're in the field, once we've decided where we're going to put the cameras, we need to set them up. And then we also need to keep the camera traps going. Awesome. Yeah, so I'm just first going to talk a little bit about what is a camera trap. A camera trap is a camera that we can leave out in our parks, and it kind of acts like a field observer. So instead of us biologists sitting out in our parks, 365 days a year, we leave our cameras out and they do all the observing for us. So we generally set them up on trees, or sometimes we wedge them in between rocks, or in places where there aren't any trees and rocks, like in the tundra, which we don't really have in the south of BC. We drive stakes into the ground and attach them to those. And they take pictures of things that are warm and that move in front of them. So generally that is animals. Sometimes though, we get pictures of trees or grass that the sun has hit and that are wiggling in front of the camera. And sometimes we also get pictures of, sometimes we can set cameras to take pictures at the same time every day so that we can make sure that our cameras are working properly, or we have some researchers in our lab group that take a look at what kind of vegetation, what kind of plants are growing, or if it's snowy or rainy. So we get all kinds of pictures. And on the right here, you can see a couple of red arrows off of the camera trap. And those are kind of the two different zones that we can take pictures in. So one points down towards the ground, and that helps us capture things like rodents, so mice or squirrels. And then there's also an arrow that points upwards, and that helps us take pictures of bigger animals. So that can be people, that can be moose or deer or bears. So we're making sure that we get the whole range of the animal kingdom on our camera traps.
Just before we go on, there's been some rumbling in the chat of some issues with sound that I just want to quickly try and troubleshoot. Can anyone maybe just mention if my sound is okay right now? Or for those that were having trouble, if it's okay, if I kind of hold my mic a little bit closer to my face like this, better. Okay. Okay, seems good for the most part. Oh, we still have a couple issues. Any Zoom techs have suggestions on how to make the sound a bit better? Let's see what I can do here. Is that any better? Seem to be getting a lot of mixed signals about sound. Okay, well, I am going to push ahead and hope for the best and just try and speak as clearly as I can. Okay, so continuing on from kind of what Jamie had got us into with camera traps here. One of the next things that we often need to decide about camera trapping is where we're going to put our camera traps. So say we have a park and we want to know how we're going to place the cameras across the park in order to get an idea of what the wildlife are doing in that park. So it really depends on a number of different things how we place the cameras in the park. And a couple of things that it might depend on is what we're studying and why we're studying it. So cameras, for example, can go on trails or off of trails, kind of just in the forest. And that kind of depends on what kind of species we are looking to study, what kind of animals we want to study, as well as what kind of questions we're trying to answer. So if we're looking kind of, if animals maybe are using trails less because there's more humans in the park or something like that, then we'd want a lot of cameras on trails in that park, just as an example. And so what we often do is create maps. We have all gotten really good in our research lab at creating maps, and we kind of will develop a system to have cameras, either evenly spaced throughout the park or sampling a variety of different habitats. Or maybe we want all our cameras just focused in one certain type of habitat because we know that there's an animal there that we're really interested in. And so these are just a couple of different systems. You don't need to worry about the names too much, but the idea is just that, you can either have them kind of randomly spaced out in the park. You can kind of have them, in the systematic grid style. And there's different implications of what that means when we go and then look at the data. But the idea here is just that there's a couple of different ways that we can go out and set up these cameras. So the next step is going and actually setting up the camera traps. And I'm going to show a brief video of one of our colleagues, Mitch Fennell. It's about 4 minutes long. He's got a really nice video that kind of explains how camera traps are set up when we get into the field. So I'm going to go ahead and play that.
Hi, my name is Mitch Fennell. I'm a member of the Wildlife Coexistence Lab in the Biodiversity Research Center, as well as in the Faculty of Forestry here at UBC. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to set up a camera trap. So here we have an example of one of our camera traps, and we've picked our site here. We're just off a trail. And about 3 meters back, we've picked a nice tree that's about the size that we can get our straps around to secure the camera. And I'll show you how that's done here. So we first secure the camera with just a webbing strap here. And we make sure it's generally pointed in the direction that we're looking to aim our photos at, but we can fine tune that a little bit later. The next step we're going to do is insert batteries into the camera, which I've already done today. And after that, we'll put in our SD card, which records all the photos onto it, and turn the camera on. And these cameras that we use are pre-programmed using a computer with the settings all in the SD cards themselves. So we can just conveniently turn them on with the default settings, and they're all good to go. So the next thing that I'll do is generally take some measurements of the site, some things that we might use as variables in some of our models. And those will include things like the height of the camera on the tree, as well as the distance from the camera to whatever feature we're pointing at, whether it be a trail, a game trail, a water feature, or some kind of bait to lure animals into the site. So next, we'll do a walk test to make sure that we're capturing both big and small animals of interest on the feature that we're pointed at. So to set that up here, we'll put the camera into that mode. It'll begin with this flashing red light that, as it's triggered by either heat or motion, or both, it will flash red so we can tell where the camera is going to be picking up animals as they move by through the forest. So in this case, we can see down low here, as well as up higher, like bigger animals. And often in the field, we'll imitate different animals as we do that. So in this case, the camera's well set to capture both big and small animals on the trail in front of us. We'll make sure it's tightly secured. We'll turn the camera on. And then the final step is to make sure that we secure the camera with a lock so that nobody can walk off with all of our data before we come back to the camera. So the main limiting factors between how long we can check the cameras and leave them out in the field before returning to them to collect data is the number of photos that can be captured on an SD card, which for a 32 gigabyte card tends to be about 40,000, as well as the number of photos that can be captured with one set of batteries, and that also conveniently tends to be about 40,000. And that's also limited by things like the temperature outside, where if it's colder, the batteries will die a little bit faster. An important thing to note is that if you do see a wildlife research camera out in the forest, perhaps in a provincial park in BC where we have multiple projects from our lab going on, it's best if you just leave them alone and don't mess with them, as they're finely tuned to point directly where we're hoping to collect our data. And messing with that standardization can complicate our results a little bit. All of our cameras will tend to have a sticker on top with contact details, an email address, as well as the name of UBC and our lab. If you want to get in contact about any more information about the project. There will also be a trailhead poster on most trails where there are cameras that might pick up people. So if there aren't trees like this guy here available for the sites that we're looking to set at, we have a few different options. One of them is bringing something to attach the cameras to ourselves, something like a signpost that we drive into the ground if we're in the high alpine. We've also had some success setting them on large rocks in boulder fields, where if we bring a long enough strap and lock to get around it, we're able to kind of wedge the cameras in there. There are also other options that include things like tripods that you can set them on and anchor to the ground to prevent animals from knocking them over in things like prairies. Hi, my name is...
There we go. Thank you, Mitch, for that. So the next kind of step that Mitch kind of briefly mentioned was how do we keep camera traps going? And it's one of the things that Jamie and I have alluded to a little bit, which is that we have to get out and find the cameras. There's a lot of cameras set up in our BC parks, and in several other projects. And that often means upwards of 30, 40, 50, 60 cameras set up for each project. And that can typically involve multiple field teams going out and kind of helping out with those projects. So these are this is a moment for me to acknowledge the great team that we have, and the teamwork that we have in being able to get out. And so what we usually do is we hike to them to make sure they're working and change their batteries. So you can kind of see in this photo here, as well as their memory cards, which all of the photos are stored to when they're taken. So we'll take battery packs, memory cards, we'll take extra cameras in our backpacks, and then we'll use GPS devices that have the location of the camera to go and find it. And a GPS device is only so accurate. So once we get there to where the GPS says it is, we'll spend a little bit of time just kind of searching around in the forest, on the trail, to be able to find where that camera is. And sometimes they're easier to find than others. Sometimes you get sidetracked a little bit just trying to find a camera that is around. And oftentimes our cameras, can be really remote in certain parks, so we might need to camp for a couple days. And sometimes, if we're really, really lucky, we get to ride in helicopters or on quads to go and access our cameras. It's a really fun part of our job, and we get to visit some beautiful areas in our backyard and in kind of the South Coast BC parks as well. So the kind of format of
Chris, there's a question in the chat. Someone's just wondering,
yeah.
like, about the you said it was about 40,000 photos. What does that mean in terms of time? Like, how long did the cameras sit before you have to go and swap them out?
Sure, yeah. So it depends on, the main thing that depends on is how long it takes for that amount of images to build up in the on the camera. So in some of our South Coast BC parks, there's a lot of images that get racked up really quickly on the cameras because we have a lot of park users in these parks. So the time that the battery lasts can be a little bit shorter. Maybe Jamie, I can get your expertise a little bit. You might have a better idea than me of what that timeline actually looks like.
Yeah, for sure. So I spent quite a bit of time in Joffrey Lakes Provincial Park and Garibaldi Provincial Park, where we have cameras on trail. And those typically fill up in about a week or two. So yeah, like Chris was saying, they rack up images really quickly. But a camera that's off trail, for example, that's only taking pictures of animals, that battery set probably lasts quite a while. The only reason that we go and check them so often, those cameras that are off trail, is because they often get damaged by animals, or they might have, water damage or something like that. So yeah, like Chris was saying, it depends where the camera is set. Really high use areas, the batteries die quite quickly.
Sweet, thank you, Jamie. So for this kind of section of the presentation, I'm gonna use this kind of outline to talk a little bit more about what kind of questions camera traps can help us answer when we're monitoring wildlife in BC parks. And I'm going to pose a couple of times. I'm going to pose some questions that I'm hoping I can get everyone to get their ideas in the chat about, and then we'll go from there. So in general, the kinds of questions that camera traps can help us answer are things like, what kinds of animals are in a park? How are animals spread out in a park? How do animals use park habitat? How many animals of one kind are in a park? Are the animals in a park healthy? And how are the animals in a park behaving? I saw another question that I can maybe just answer before we move on, which was, why would you put a camera on a hiking trail if there's less animals and it makes the card fill up? It's actually a great question. So in general, wildlife actually really like trails. In general, between, if you're putting a camera trap on a trail versus off a trail, not only will you get more detections of, more photos of humans when the camera is set up on the trail, you'll typically get more pictures of wildlife as well. So we take that kind of into consideration when we're deciding where we put the cameras. And it depends kind of what the original research question was in terms of whether we decide to set cameras up on trail or off trail. Typically, we often like to get a mix of on-trail and off-trail cameras, but sometimes certain projects will just put all the trails on a camera. Thank you, Rebecca, for that question about privacy for hikers and that. I'm actually going to get to that towards the last section of my part of this presentation. So I'll answer that question in a sec when I get there. The first kind of question that I wanted to talk about that camera traps can help us answer is what kinds of animals are in a park. And so I wanted to kind of use this example to get you guys involved a bit. And this kind of, imagine this this line down the middle here is kind of separating, maybe two different habitats that we've put camera traps in. So on the left, let's just say, these are the animals that we've gotten photos of in Joffre Provincial Park. And on the right, these are animals we've gotten photos of in Garibaldi Provincial Park. So I wanted to ask you guys to, first of all, on the left side here, count how many different kinds of animals there are, and then count how many animals there are in total. And maybe just throw your answers in the chat here. And I'll give you I'll put a brief timer on. We'll say 30 seconds or maybe a minute, and you guys can give me your estimations. Three species, 10 rabbits, yeah, 12 total. Sweet. Okay. So yeah, so we got 3 different species on the left here, and we got 12 total animals. Perfect. Yeah, I'm seeing that a lot. And then let's do the same thing on the right here. How many different species are there? How many different kinds of animals? And then how many animals in total are there? Sweet. Yeah, so I'm getting eight or 7 different kinds of species and a total of 10 animals. And kind of what I wanted to highlight with that is that in itself is a really kind of interesting piece of information that we can get from camera traps, which is how many animals there are in total, as well as how many different kinds of animals there are. And so that gives us a metric about diversity and about abundance, which tell us different things about the wildlife in that park or in that habitat. So on the left here, we had more overall animals. We had 12 animals, but only 3 species. And on the right here, we had a smaller number of overall animals, but a higher number of different species. So a little bit more diversity. And that's just a kind of example of when we get data from camera traps and we start looking at it from a very at a very coarse level at the start. We can kind of get a sense of, if there's a lot of one animal in a certain area, then we know that maybe that animal really likes a feature about that habitat there, and we can kind of start to investigate why there's so many of them there. If there's another area where there's like a really large diversity of species, but not that many of each of them, then that can kind of start to provoke questions for us and start us to kind of start to get our brains pumping and the juices flowing to start trying to understand the wildlife in these parks. So the next kind of exercise I wanted to do was get you guys to tell me, using these letters that are in the top left corners of these photos, which of these animals you do not think could be captured in BC. So we have camera trap projects from all over the world. Obviously, we have lots going on in BC, but I wanted you guys to throw in the chat here which animals you don't think we can capture in BC. Nice. So I'm seeing a lot of C. So that one's a pretty obvious one. It's an orangutan there. So good work on that. And then I've also seen a bit of J here, which is a sun bear. And I've also seen a lot of A up here, which is an ocelot. And the kind of the idea here is just that we get you know, in our lab we get projects from all over the world, but we have a lot of focus in BC, and it's really fun you know, sharing the images that we get from all of our camera traps all around the world, and especially in our BC parks. So the next thing I kind of wanted to talk about is, you know, an example of a close encounter that I found myself on in one of our parks here in BC. This unfortunately wasn't a South Coast park, but this is a grizzly bear, which, as I mentioned, you know, is kind of my research focus. And on our camera traps, we will get like a date and timestamp up kind of in the top left, if you can see that, about when that photo was taken. And you can see this one was taken at about 11:15 in the morning. Then at that same site, about 45 minutes later, is me hiking by that camera. And I didn't throw it on, but this is actually a mama grizzly bear with a cub. And you know, she was walking the way that, you know, the opposite way that I was walking. So it was very lucky that I didn't run into her. But the you know, the idea here is that we really do in our parks share spaces with animals, and it kind of goes back to the question that we got about, you know, why we would set up cameras on trails and not off trails. It's really because animals really like using the trails in our parks, and this is just kind of an example of a close encounter for me. And what's interesting is that because of you know, how much we share the parks with each other, with these species, it's really important to kind of emphasize, you know, responsibility as a park user, and including you know, kind of leaving no trace, and making sure that you're being responsible when you're out there, because the parks are also for the wildlife that we have here. And what I find really interesting in particular is kind of how, you know, the behavior of some of these animals might differ because of the trail systems that we have and because of park users. And so the example I kind of have of that is two cameras that are from Golden Ears. So this is just a really zoomed in picture of a map of two cameras from Golden Ears. And you can see this green line here is a trail, and the kind of little heat map around shows how frequently cougars, in this case, were detected at these two sites. And they're right next to each other. They're really close in distance, but one is an on-trail site, so it's a camera set up on a hiking trail, and one is an off-trail site, so a camera set up just off the hiking trail. And this is a really interesting example of how animals might change their behavior to kind of coexist with humans in our parks. And we can see on the left here, this camera and this camera, they get a similar number of photos of cougars, but the one on the trail gets a lot more of cougars at night, and the one off the trail gets a lot more of cougars during the day. And that's just because humans are using these trails a lot during the day. So the cougars are saying, well, I can still use this spot, but I can just use it at night, and then I'm probably not going to run into any people. Whereas off the trail, they're a little bit more likely to use it during the day and a little bit less likely to use it during the night, because they're less likely to run into people. And this again just kind of you know, emphasizes the kind of shared space that we have between animals and humans in our parks, and the importance of being a responsible park user, but also the ability of animals to kind of change their behavior to coexist with us really well. The next question that I want to talk about that camera traps can help us answer is how do animals use parks? So we can kind of get an idea of the behavior of animals from certain pictures. So this is a really cute picture of a deer and her fawn back there, resting, hanging out, having a good time. And then another one at a similar site of a deer, of a very speedy deer, zooming by a camera. And this is a really interesting piece of information, because based on, you know, where we get these different photos, we can kind of get a sense of, all right, in this area of the park, when we get photos of this animal, they're kind of just resting, they're taking it easy, and we can kind of start trying to figure out why that is. Whereas in another area of the park, they're a lot more, careful, let's say, or they're less willing to rest, and they're kind of just being very careful and being very speedy and getting by, and that helps us gain a lot of insight into the behavior of the animals that we have inside our parks as well. Oops. And then we can answer, how many animals of one kind are in a park. So this kind of count of images is from Golden Ears and Malcolm Knapp. And so, along the top, we get all of our kind of human detections, which are typically the highest frequency or the most photos that we get. And then we can kind of count, of each of the other individual species, how many photos of those animals there are. And then that gives us a sense of the abundance of each of them within the park. So this is a little bit different. What time frame is this count? Believe this is over one summer, I think. And so, yeah, so we get a sense for how many of each kind of animal are in the park. And that's obviously a really interesting piece of information for us, especially when we compare it to the number of humans that we get. And lastly, we can answer questions like, are the animals in a park healthy? So this is just kind of a bit of a graphic photo of this moose here that's got a little bit of a fly infestation going on. So sometimes we get to look at some really crazy photos like that. And lastly, one of the things I kind of touched on already about how animals are behaving in the park, with the kind of timestamps that we get on our camera trap photos, we're able to look at, are we getting more photos of animals during the day or during the night? And we can kind of get a sense of throughout the time of day where and when animals are using certain parts of the park. And lastly, I know we kind of touched on this, or I had gotten a question of this about, kind of like privacy issues and whether cameras take pictures of people. Of course they do. Cameras take pictures of anything that's moving and warm. And what we immediately do is go ahead and blur all those images. So this is actually an image of Jamie. And we go and we blur all these to protect everyone's privacy. I'm gonna pass it on in a second here to Jamie. I can go ahead and quickly answer some of these questions I've gotten in the chat about, what do we do with information from the camera traps? That's a really, important question. And there's a variety of different things and a variety of different ways that kind of information and the research that we do with camera traps helps with park management and with land management in general. One of them is just us directly working with BC Parks and other organizations to build decision frameworks based on the results that we're getting from our data, as well as just producing good science essentially, and just having a product of a scientific result and saying to the decision makers, here's the science that we have, please use it to the best of your ability to make decisions that the evidence suggests are the right ones. And quickly, just going back to the moose that had the fly infestation, we unfortunately weren't able to, as far as I know, follow that moose around. So I actually don't know what the end result for the moose was. I think typically, those kinds of infestations happen. So hopefully the moose is okay. I'm gonna hand it off to Jamie here. Yeah, this is gonna be a really fun section of the presentation as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'll also just say really quickly about people. Another big part of what I'm doing right now, so I don't just look at pictures of animals and try to ID them. I also spend quite a bit of time blurring all the pictures that we get of people. So we're definitely super conscious that not everybody can say, yes, I want my picture taken, or no, I don't want my picture taken when they're passing in front of a trail camera. So we make sure to blur everybody's images. Nobody really gets their hands on images of people except for us. So we're really conscious of privacy. Yeah. So the next little bit we're going to do is we're going to play a game of Can You Guess the Animal? So Chris walked us through how we set up the cameras, how we go and check them. But now we have all of this information. We have all of these pictures that we need to go through. So yeah, that's another important part of what we do is identifying animals that are in our camera trap pictures. So we're all going to put on our Wild Coast scientist hats and we're going to try and ID some animals. And I'm just going to say really quickly that all of the pictures that I'm going to show you today have been captured from our cameras that are set up in BC Parks. So that's pretty cool. We're going to see all the animals that we share our parks with. And yeah, as we kind of alluded to earlier, there are prizes to be won. So throw your best guess in the chat and see if you win a prize. And this is just an example of some of our really cool prizes. Nice. So this is our first one. If you have a guess of what this might be, type your answer in the chat. Maybe you can talk about it with your friend or your parent. Awesome. It looks like everybody's really got this one. You guys know your stuff. Yeah, so this is a picture. Well, these are pictures of black bears. And despite their name, they can be a bunch of different colors. So these three are all black, but sometimes they can be brown. Those are called cinnamon bears oftentimes. Or they can also be white. Those are known as Kermoder spirit bears. And as we can see, this little gaffer on the right has a brown muzzle. So sometimes they have brown muzzles, but not always. And another important feature of black bears is that they have kind of a straight nose when you look at them from the side. So like this picture on the top left. And that's important because another type of bear that we get in British Columbia is grizzly bears, Chris's favorite animal. And grizzly bears have kind of a sloped nose when you look at them from the side. So that's just another important distinguishing feature that helps us tell whether it's a black bear. All right, let's give the next one a go.
I can't use the chat. So could I just guess like from talking?
Sure, why not? Nice, we've got some really good guesses in the chat. Some people got it right, some people are really close. Awesome. Yeah, so these little friends, these are mule deer, also called black-tailed deer sometimes. They're really similar to white-tailed deer, but they have a few features that help us know that they are mule deer. And one of those things is that they have a black tail. So the whole upper part of the tail is black. And they also have huge ears. So their ears are more than half the length of their head. And another really important thing that helps us know that these are mule deers are a dark patch on the forehead that to me kind of makes them look like they're frowning or a little bit grumpy. Those are all really important features that help us know that this is a mule deer or a black-tailed deer, but white-tailed deer is a really good guess. Nice work. Okay, let's try the next one. They're gonna get a little trickier, so let's see what happens. Really good guesses. Ooh, we've got some animal ID experts in the chat. That's so cool.
A wild hare.
Yeah, that's a really good guess. So yes, it is a rabbit or a hare. And I think I saw one person that correctly guessed that this is a snowshoe hare. So a giant panda. That's also a pretty good guess. Not quite. It's a pretty small giant panda. So yeah, this is a snowshoe hare and it's named for its really big furry hind feet that act like snowshoes. And actually sometimes you can see their tracks in the snow and they kind of have these like giant back feet that go right up close to their front feet as they're hopping along. So in the summertime, they're usually reddish or grayish brown. And in the wintertime, they're all white, like these two guys that we got pictures of in the nighttime. And this guy in the big picture, this guy's actually molting. So he's in between his summer and his winter fur. So he's kind of a mottled white and brown. Yeah, so snowshoe hares, mostly we look at their feet and where they are, like where we capture them in the world. They also have a really small tail, and they usually are active in the nighttime, so we don't tend to see them too much. Nice work. Okay, this next one is super tricky. So let's see. Let's see if anybody can guess what this animal is.
A weasel.
That's a really good guess. Oh my gosh, you guys are killing it. I thought I was going to trip you up with this one, but I guess not. Wow. Oh my goodness. Yes, this is a wolverine. Also pretty closely related to a badger, so that can be tricky to tell them apart, but I'll give you a couple tricks. So we can tell that this is a wolverine because it has dark fur, but it's got this light stripe that kind of stretches all around the side of its body to the base of its tail, so where its tail meets its body. It also has some light colored fur above the eyes, kind of looks like big mean eyebrows. And it also has some light fur on its throat. And these animals are very fierce. They are fierce carnivores and they're pretty ferocious. They defend their food from really big other carnivores like bears and cougars, even though they're not that big. So they're really tough little beasts. Nice work. I think I saw a question of, is this wolverine pooping? And I'm actually not sure. I think it's just snacking, but hard to tell. All right, let's give the next one a go. Looks like I might have tricked some of you a little bit. That's awesome. Nice. So I'm seeing a mixture of wolf and coyote. This creature is actually a coyote. Hard to tell though. They do look pretty similar, but coyotes are a little bit skinnier and narrower. They have big feet, big ears, they have a pointed nose, they've kind of got short legs and small feet, compared to wolves that are kind of they look more like a German Shepherd. So a little bit more, they're a little bigger, they're a little thicker. They have bushy, long tails with dark tips, bigger snout and feet. So yeah, this is another animal that we capture quite commonly in South Coast BC parks. Often gets confused with wolves, but yeah, a few things that can help us tell them apart. Nice work. All right, I think this next one is going to be tricky. Maybe I'll see if I actually trick any of you because you really seem to know what you're talking about. Oh my goodness, you know everything. Incredible. Wow, so I see a few of you have gotten either really close or have gotten it right. This is a marten. This is an American marten, which is also a kind of weasel. So those of you who put weasel in the chat, you're absolutely right. I think they're pretty cute, don't you think? Even this kind of scary one that's got evil glowing eyes in the nighttime. So yeah, American martens are a kind of weasel. They have kind of brown or blonde fur. They have dark legs and an orange kind of throat and chest and these really cute small ears. We also tend to get, a fair number of pictures of martens. Do they use scent to mark territory? That's actually, I'm not sure. Chris, do you know that?
I do not know that actually off the top of my head. Yeah, I've spent too long studying grizzly bears. Honestly, I need to diversify my wildlife facts.
That is absolutely fair. We actually have someone studying martens in the lab who's kind of our resident weasel expert. So I feel like we've all gotten a bit lazy because Chris Stinson will tell us what, what it is and all about it. Wow, that was super impressive. Good work, everyone. Good guesses. All right, we've got a few left. Got a few really cool animals left to see. So what do you think this is?
Bobcat.
Good guess. Nice. So kind of similar to the coyote pictures, I'm getting a mixture of two different animals, two different answers.
Lynx.
Yeah, so I'm getting both bobcat and lynx, and the answer is bobcat. So I'm going to give you a few little tricks that you can use to tell whether it's a lynx or a bobcat. So we can tell that this is a bobcat in our pictures because it's brown with a lot of spots. Lynxes tend to have fewer spots and they tend to be only on their legs, but these bobcats in these pictures kind of have spots on their legs and on their bodies. They also have that little tail with a black tip on top. Lynxes have an even shorter tail. Another thing that we can look at is kind of the overall shape and size of the body. So lynxes are bigger, they have bigger legs, they have bigger feet, and they also kind of have like a sloped body. So their bum is a little higher than their shoulders, which we don't see quite as pronounced with bobcats. And another thing that we can think about as well is where we're capturing these images. We don't really tend to see lynxes on the south coast of BC. They're a little bit more to the interior. Yeah, so we kind of use all of those things to decide what it is, but lynx is a really good guess. Let me know if I'm missing any questions too. I'm
Cougar. Cougar.
Good guess. Nice work. I think we might need to hire some of you all to work for our lab, go through our pictures because you seem to know your IDs really well. You'll help me out a lot. Awesome. Yeah, so these three pictures all show cougars, which I think is one of my favorite things to ID. It's really exciting to catch pictures of them. So yeah, these are cougars. They're also called mountain lions or pumas or panthers. I know that just came up in the chat. I saw really quickly. And how do we tell these are cougars? Well, it seems that you all kind of know, but they are really big cats. They have those long tails that they hold quite low when they're walking. I think they also kind of big bodies and little heads, and they have dark markings on their faces and on the tips of the tail. Yeah, these are really cool creatures. It's pretty neat that we get to share our parks with these animals. And it also means that we have to be quite safe, you know, in our parks, knowing that we share them with these kinds of animals. Nice work. All right, I've got one more. And if this one doesn't trip you up, I don't know what will.
Marmot.
All right, it seems like folks know what this is too. Yeah, nicely done. These are two pictures of a marmot. So depending on where we set our cameras, we actually get quite a few pictures of these. So I've seen my fair share of marmots. And how can we tell it's a marmot? Well, actually, this is a specific species of marmot, which is called a hoary marmot. And its front half is kind of grayish white. Its back half is darker, and it's got dark little paws. And it's also got a patch of white fur on its forehead. I don't know if you can see in the bigger picture. And And so these creatures live in higher elevation spots. I don't know if any of you have spent time in Garibaldi, for example, but if you ever hike Panorama Ridge, you will hear them screaming. You might also see them kind of poking around. Yeah, so these are really cool creatures that we could just share our parks with. Great work, everyone. Very nicely done. I'm really impressed that you are all so up to speed on your animal ID.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamie. That was super fun, guys. Yeah, really, really good job. I definitely wasn't expecting everyone to be this good at IDing, so very impressive. I just saw a quick question about if we got many birds on cameras, and we do get a lot of birds actually on all of our cameras. We tend to, you know, to some of our we have some birders in the lab, and you know, they would like us probably to do more work on birds. We don't actually do a ton of work on birds. It's hard with the kind of low number of bird detections that we get to do much research with them, but we do get lots of photos of birds. So I quickly, I know we're running a little bit out of time here, so I might skip the last thing that I was going to do, but I wanted to just kind of point your attention to this kind of online, just an example of an online interactive tool that that each of you can go and kind of explore. This is a which maybe I'll throw a link of into the chat when I get the chance, but we have some tools like this that are kind of interactive. This one, for example, is an interactive map of golden ears and Malcolm Knapp, and you can go on and you can look at where the cameras are set up in the park, and you can look at kind of heat maps of where different species are captured the most, as well as look at some of the photos of some of the species that are captured in that project. It's a really, really fun tool. I definitely encourage everyone to go around and play around with it. I was going to show it now, but we're a little bit tight on time, and I think maybe there's some questions that we still have to answer. So I'm going to skip that, but I'll throw the link in the chat, and I encourage you to go and check this out. It's a really fun tool. And lastly, just thank you all for coming and for being a great audience and for being involved in the ID guessing and everything. That was super fun. And you know, you can connect with us on our kind of forestry website, as well as on Twitter and on Instagram. Yeah, so thanks everyone. We can maybe just use the last couple minutes to answer some questions. Yeah, appreciate everyone coming out. Thank you.
There was a question a little higher up in the chat before we did the animal ID, just kind of about, can you give some examples of the kind of decision making that you've made as a result of, you know, the camera trap information?
Yes. So it's hard because it's hard to answer that directly, because you know, we as researchers, we're typically not the decision makers. We like to, you know, produce the science and the evidence that that can help decision makers with that process. But in terms of a specific example, I don't know if you have one, maybe Jamie, that's like a bit more specific to parks. I know, for example, there's been a lot of we've got some good research that's come out of Alberta about caribou and seismic and the effects of seismic lines. And I believe that that's had some direct management implications.
I can
yeah.
probably help with this one.
Yeah, go ahead,
coming
please.
from the BC Park perspective.
Sure.
I mean, information like this would strongly impact any decisions on what we might do with putting in new facilities in a park. If we knew that there was grizzly bear habitat somewhere, we definitely wouldn't put a parking lot there. You know, so knowing what animals are where in our parks and how they're using the parks would significantly impact management planning for facility installation, and then knowing the behaviors, not just the number of animals, but the behaviors there, you know, would potentially impact where trails are being installed, and things like that. So yeah, those would be the direct implications in within BC Parks.
Sweet. Thanks, Jennifer.
I noticed another question just came up. Would trail builders take a look at this information? So before any trails or parking lots or campsites are put in, our conservation staff do impact assessments on those areas. And yes, all of that information, archaeological information and animal information would be taken into account before any changes or any additions are made in a park, making sure to minimize any impacts that we might have.
Okay, great. Well, I might stop my screen share here. Yeah, definitely. If anyone gets the chance, go and check out that that map. It's really, really fun to play around with.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, I just want to say thanks so much to Chris and Jamie. That was awesome. I really loved the guessing game and just all those amazing photos. That was really fun. And thanks to Jennifer and BC Parks for the opportunity to host this. We're going to run our next virtual Explore Day will be December 7th. It will be an evening session at 6 p.m. It'll be all about birds. December is all about the bird counts and bird counts for kids. So it'll be a bird-filled month. So I hope to see some of you in person at some of our counts and also online as we do some virtual birding stuff as well. So thanks so much for being with us this morning and enjoy the rest of your afternoons.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.